Today, you'll learn how to say dates, numbers, years, fractions, and percentages in English. Welcome to the 250th episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, I'm Craig.
And I'm Reza.
And if you are a new listener to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. With over 45 years of teaching between Reza and I, we're going to help you improve your English and take all aspects of it up to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm very well, Craig. And you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very happy to be podcasting again.
You mentioned the 45 years. Let's recalculate that since we are talking about numbers. I think it's more than that now.
Well, let's see.
I think it's 47.5 approximately.
When did you first start teaching English?
My first paid job, I believe, was 1993.
Mine was 1995 or 6. So we can say nearly 50.
It's very nearly 50.
Yep.
It's more than 45.
So we can start saying nearly 50 years of teaching experience.
Only that makes us sound very old.
Which we are. We want to thank you, first of all, for all the feedback you've been sending us. We've received many voice messages and lots of emails, so thank you very much. We will get to yours eventually. If you have sent us feedback and we don't mention it this episode or next episode, we promise that you will get your questions answered and you will hear your audio message. This podcast is for you, so it really helps us when you send us feedback and your questions. What's first this week, Reza?
Well, first of all, we've got some audio feedback from Nicolas from Colombia.
Yes, and this is quite a long message, so we will be interrupting Nicholas's message and making comments on what he says during his message. So here's Nicholas's message.
Hey Reza and Craig, it's Nicholas from Colombia. Thank you very much for your comments on my audio message last time, and thank you for playing it. You played it on episode 241 about artificial intelligence, and so I tried something. I said to my iPhone, Siri, play the podcast. And your voice started to sound on my phone immediately. I didn't even have to specify which podcast. And I have more, how do you call it, channels? Podcast channels? I mean, I have more podcasts from other people, but I actually only listen to yours, and some of the reason why are because you talk about different topics. So we, the listeners, get to learn a broad spectrum of things. I really appreciate that you're very brave to get the mic and record about several topics, even when they can fall outside your area of expertise.
Well, most things do actually fall outside our area of expertise, don't they? But we do try to cover as many things as possible and give a variety of vocabulary.
Yes, and speaking of vocabulary, just before we carry on listening, can I point out some excellent vocabulary that Nicholas has used? He used the collocation a broad spectrum, una gama amplia. That's a fantastic collocation, a broad spectrum. And he also said fall outside our area of expertise, which is a very good collocation as well. And he pronounced correctly the word mic. He's not talking about Miguelito or Miguelico, Michael. He's talking about microphone. And he knew that it's pronounced mic, but written M-I-C as a contraction. Well done.
Yeah, and very good pronunciation, Nicholas. One small thing, you spoke about podcast channels on your phone. They're actually podcast feeds, F-E-E-D-S, and that means you can subscribe to the podcast so that every week when we release a new podcast, it automatically goes to your mobile phone. If you want to do that and you're on an Android phone, then download Google Podcast app in the Play Store. If you use an iPhone, you have a native iPhone podcast app on your phone. It's the purple one. And again, search for Ingles Podcast, subscribe, and automatically you get every new episode. Let's go back to Nicholas.
And I wanted to ask you, how do you prepare the podcasts? Like, how do you choose the topic? How do you research the information? How do you set the room? And if you have any tips or things you do to collect and verify information when playing the podcasts you want to share with us, maybe, because I'm about to start university, so it'd be very useful if you have any tips for me, like how to research information or verify it, if it's a good source of information, a true or false or something like that.
Well, Nicholas, when it comes to technical matters, most things fall outside my area of expertise. Craig is a lot more informed about this. I hand you over to the true expert.
Well, thank you very much, Reza, for the compliment. We record the podcast into 2 separate microphones, or mics, as Nicholas says, and these microphones go into a portable digital recorder, and then that goes into my computer. The file gets edited in a free program called Audacity, and I add the introduction and the outro at the end of the podcast. And then when it's been edited, it gets uploaded to Libsyn, which is a podcast hosting service, and automatically that goes out to iTunes and all the different podcast apps. And the show notes, Reza and I collaborate. We work together on the show notes before we record. And then those show notes get slightly edited a little bit and then go on the web page at inglespodcast.com. And of course, Angelica writes the transcriptions that we offer on Patreon after the show is published. If you are interested, Nicolas, or anybody, in starting your own podcast, I will put links to these services and the software in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/250.
And you said, where do we get our information from? Well, as you say quite rightly, we talk about many different themes of which we don't know that much, although we do know the English language behind them. But we research content about things like, business or the theatre, which we are not experts on. We just check our information online. But to be honest, when it comes to explaining vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, patterns, that type of thing, Craig and I just use the information we have in our heads that we've built up over nearly 50 years of experience, remember?
Yeah. What we do in the classroom every week, actually, when we're teaching our students. And some of you notice as we are recording that we do sometimes have problems with noisy neighbours. That's one of the disadvantages of recording these podcasts in my flat and not in a professional recording studio. Back to Nicholas.
Another reason why I keep listening to your podcasts is because your voices are calm but not boring, deep and not screamy, and the energy you put in is engaging, and I could listen to both of you for hours. When I started to listen these podcasts, I thought briefly about quitting because I might get confused since I chose American English as the accent I will learn. But see, I'm trying to do British accent in the last 5 seconds, I think. There are plenty of reasons why I kept listening to you, and now I even can do a British accent thanks to you, or at least try it, like the one I'm doing right now. So, thank you very much for all of your podcasts and the work you've done. It's really helpful, and keep up the good work.
Well, Nicholas, thank you very much. And very interesting listening to what you say about different accents and the pronunciation, etc. And yes, we did notice that you went into a British accent, particularly the way you said that you learned things from us. Even I'm not so British myself, because remember, Nicholas, that you shouldn't get obsessed with accents, because even in the United States, there are many different accents. Not all Americans talk the same. And people have different accents all over the world, so don't get obsessed with that. There's no reason why you shouldn't listen to podcasts in British and American English. I'm from Northern Ireland. Craig is from the southeast of England. We have different accents, although we're both British.
Yeah, so our advice to Nicholas and to everybody is to expose your ears to as many accents as possible. Listen to a variety of different accents. And I did like the way Nicholas is practicing on working on his British accent. And when he said the word right and he didn't pronounce the T at the end is how I often speak. So not right, but right. Right now. Very good, Nicholas.
Yes, Nicholas, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, your intonation is excellent.
And that was the second audio message that Nicholas has sent us. Second is an ordinal number. And 2 is a cardinal number. But more about that later. Let's look at the main topic of today's podcast: years, numbers, fractions, and percentages, and dates. What about years, Reza? What year are we in this year?
Well, who knows when people are actually listening to this podcast, but we're recording it in the year 2019. Or I could say 2019. There are 2 ways to say it.
That's right. What would you normally say?
I personally prefer 2019.
Me too. Yeah.
But 2019 is perfectly correct. Nothing wrong with it.
When did we start podcasting?
2014, I believe.
Yeah. So it's been 5 years. Wow.
5 years up to now. But we hope it's many more. Craig, when were you born?
I was born in 1963.
And I was born in 1970. So yes, I'm the youngster. For many of our listeners, in 1970, 1963 probably seems like a long time ago.
10 years in English is a decade. Is it a decade or decade?
British or American. Nicholas was talking about this earlier. I would say decade.
Me too.
But most Americans would say decade.
Decade. Yeah, decade. So 10 years is a decade. For example, 2001 to 2010. Would you say 2001?
Yeah, there's no other way to say it.
You can't say 20 or 1.
No. It's weird. I often talk about this in class. It often comes up, it appears. There's a period of a decade from 2001 to 2010, or 2010, if you prefer, that there's only one way to say the year. Mm-hmm. You have to say 2001, 2002, 2007, etc., up to 2009. Then after that, then you have both ways. Mm-hmm. Then you can say 2010 or 2010. You can say 2011 or 2011. But for those first 9 years, there's only one way to say it. It's very curious.
Although I'm pretty sure that our American cousins don't say 2001. That is and. 2001. They would say 2001.
Yeah, they might leave out the word and.
They leave out the word and, or as we say, So they wouldn't say 2001, they'd say 2001.
Yeah. Craig, another mistake that my students make is they say the last year, but they don't mean that. They mean last year with no the. If this is 2019, what was last year?
Last year was 2018.
And what was the year before last?
The year before last was 2017.
So that's going back 1 year before last year. And what would the opposite of that be going forward?
Well, then we'd be speaking about 2021, which is the year after next. So next year, 2020, the year after next, 2021. Can you believe that next year is 2020?
I know, it's scary.
Weird, isn't it? You expect to see flying cars and futuristic cities. Now, which century are we in at the moment?
This is the 21st century. So anything which is 2000 up to 2099.
Mm-hmm.
is the 21st century.
That's always kind of confused me a bit because it's 2019, 2018, but it's the 21st century. But if you think about it from zero, from the beginning until the year 99, we'd say 99 AD after the birth of Christ. So then that would be the first century, even though it's zero.
Yeah, it's the first century, but it started at zero.
So it's kind of one behind. So the 20th century is the 1900s.
Right.
And the 19th century, we speak about the 1800s.
Yeah, so if we're talking about in the 1800s, that is the 19th century. Craig, what if we wanted to say a specific decade, like the decade where you were born?
I was born in the 60s. So the preposition in, I was born in the 60s or in the 1960s. And so were you.
No, I was born in the 70s.
Oh, you were born in the 70s.
I was born in 1970, so I can say I was born in a different decade.
Okay, moving on to dates. What's the date today?
It's the 3rd of March today. Or I could also say March the 3rd or March 3rd with no the. That's very typical in American English, March 3rd.
Absolutely. And notice that we don't actually write the and we don't write of, but we do say them often when we say the date. So again, the 3rd of March, the of becomes very weak. So you don't hear the 3rd of March. You hear the 3rd of March. It's the 3rd of March. It's the 7th of March.
Craig, when's your birthday?
My birthday is May the 25th.
And when's your date of birth?
Date of birth would include the year, so 25th of May or the 25th of May, 1963. When's yours?
My date of birth is the 11th of December, 1970. So date of birth is with the year. That's the difference between that and birthday.
And if you see on a form DOB after your name and address, then obviously that's date of birth. That's the abbreviation, DOB.
As Craig mentioned earlier, this is episode 250. 250. Or as they might say in American English, 250. As Craig mentioned earlier, in American English, often they don't say the word and. But what about the number 4 million? If you speak Spanish, you probably notice something strange about that. Listen very carefully to what I say. 4 million.
No S.
Singular. Yeah.
So those numbers are singular. So we do not say millions, we say million. 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. The same with billion, $6 billion. The same with trillion, no S. So keep those big numbers singular.
Craig, let's practice a big number. Can you tell me now in 2019, what's the population of Spain?
I can tell you because I did research this. As Reza said before, we research sometimes and we check figures. The population of Spain at today's date, 46,426,197 people. What's the population of Mexico, Reza?
Ooh, it's triple Spain. It's 131,791,620.
If you want to follow along with our pronunciation of these numbers, of course, the numbers are written in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/250.
Now, Craig mentioned earlier the word cardinal. Cardinal and ordinal. They're similar words in Spanish. So cardinal for numbers is 1, 2, 3. What about ordinal, Craig?
For 1, 2, 3, we would have first, second, and third. First, second, and third.
And if I wanted to write those ordinal numbers, but using digits, not writing all the letters, how would I write first, second, third?
First, FIRST, you would write the number 1 with an ST as an abbreviation. Second would be 2ND, the abbreviation of second. And third, 3RD.
So not like Spanish at all. In Spanish, you simply write a little O if it's masculine or a little A if it's feminine. Primero, segunda, tercera, etc. Not in English. Not in English.
Let's quickly go through and check the numbers again. You can follow with us on the webpage at inglespodcast.com/250. So let's go through the number, the cardinal number, and then the ordinal number. Try to say the ordinal if you know it before you hear us say it.
So I'll do the cardinal and Craig will do the ordinal.
Yes, but you try and say the number, listener, before we do.
4,
Fourth,
5,
fifth,
6,
sixth,
7,
seventh,
8,
eighth,
9,
ninth,
10,
tenth,
11,
11th,
12,
12th,
20,
20th,
30,
30th,
21,
21st,
32,
32nd,
73,
73rd,
94,
94th.
655.
Ooh. 655th. Now, the pronunciation is a bit tricky, a bit difficult. Some of these ordinals finish with th. To get that sound, put your tongue between your teeth. Finishes with th, and just make this sound. So, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. You need to practice. In fact, going back to Nicholas's comment earlier about British pronunciation, in the south of England, you might hear that th sound as an f sound. It is quite common in the London area to hear fourth, fifth, eighth. So you may hear that, but try and get that th pronunciation as clear as possible with putting your tongue between your teeth.
It should be easy for you to remember which have th. Basically, it's 1, 2, 3 are not to th. They're first, second, third. All the rest are th, fifth, 10th, 11th. But when you have a multiple two-digit word, like, for example, 21, well, the last digit is 1. So imagine it like 1, 2, 3, 21, 22, 23, or 31, 32, 33, etc. So we say 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 31st, 32nd, 33rd. All the rest are th. It's as simple as that.
That's right.
One last little thing, don't go copying me, but in a large part of the south of Ireland, there's a very special pronunciation of 3. They say specifically tree, as if it were arable. The th is pronounced as if it were just t. So they say tree, cardinal, and third, ordinal. But that's only in parts of the south of Ireland. It's very peculiar, I know.
So 33 would be 33.
33.
33.
The classic number they use in jokes is always 33 and a third.
33 and a third. Let's go right down to the bottom now, the less than one number, 0. Let's go to 0. Now, there are different ways of saying 0 depending on the context of the sentence, depending on what you're speaking about. We can say 0, which tends to be more American English. We can say nothing. We can say nought, N-O-U-G-H-T. We can say nil. Nil is very common in sports when you speak about football scores. If Valencia played Madrid in football and Madrid scored 2 goals and Valencia did not score any goals, the result of the match is 2-0.
But it's different in tennis. We talk about love in tennis. So the score goes 15 love. That's like 15-0. Yeah. Then 30 love, etc. So love is 0 in tennis and a few other sports.
When you talk about temperature, 0. So 0 degrees in temperature. And of course, if it's colder than 0 degrees, it's below 0. So we have 6 degrees below 0, 4 degrees below 0.
Sometimes 0 is pronounced O, just like the letter O, particularly in British English and when we're talking about times, years, or phone numbers. Also for decimals. For example, the year 1905, 1905, just to clarify, 1905. We pronounce that 0 as O.
And if your phone number has a 0 in it, in British English, you'd say O. So, for example, my number is 640293. Although in American English, you would say 0. So my number is 640 and then the number. So 0 in American English, O in British English for phone numbers.
Craig, what are decimals?
Decimals, I think it's very similar in Spanish when you have a number and then there's a fraction or less than 1 of the number. You put a point, un punto, and then other numbers. So, for example, 2.36. So you say the word point for the decimal point.
And why would Craig say point? Well, attention, because there is a point. It's not a comma. In Spanish, it's a comma.
Right.
In English, it's point. So if you write it in Spanish, it doesn't make sense because it would be 2,36. But in English, it's not a comma. It's a point. We do exactly the opposite to you Spanish speakers. So for decimals, things less than 1, we put a point. And for 1,000, a million, and billion, you put a point and we put commas. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the reverse of Spanish, curiously. So another example could be 14.87. Do you notice that the number to the left of the point, I say complete, 14. But then to the right, I say individually, 14.87. I don't say 87, I say 14.87.
Reza, do you recognize this number? 3.14159.
It's approximately pi.
It's pi. Well, yeah, it's pi to 5 decimal places. It can go much longer. Infinite, I think.
Infinite.
Yeah.
Of course, Craig, there's another way we could represent pi. We're not talking about empanada or empanadilla, by the way. We're not talking about
apple pie
apple
or
pie.
shepherd's pie, no.
That would be PIE. We're just talking about PI, which we pronounce pi, but I think in Spanish you say P, but we say pi. It would be 22 over 7. 22 over. So
that's a fraction.
We're talking about fractions. So you can say one number over another. 22 over 7, 5 over 10 would be the same as 1 over 2, would be the same as a half. What other fractions could we talk about, Craig?
There is, for example, 1/5, which is 1 over 5. Notice that the bottom number is an ordinal number, 1/5. Another example, 1/10, which is 1 over 10. But these are singular. What happens if they're plural, Reza?
Well, just make the second number, which is ordinal, plural. So 3 over 8, we can say 3/8.
That's difficult, isn't it? Eighths.
There's our problem, the pronunciation.
Yeah.
And you do have to pronounce that as 3/8. Or what about, how could we say, Craig, 5 over 16?
Wait, I'm just cleaning your microphone. 5 over 16, 5/16.
7 over 8?
7/8.
And 1 over 32?
Well, back to singular again, so 1/32.
Aha, I was trying to catch you out there to see if you'd say a plural. No, so if it's just 1 at the top, it's singular. But if it's more than 1, it's going to be plural. In Spanish, you don't often say things like 1/32. You would say uno sobre 32. But in English, it's more common. Mm-hmm. We do say it more commonly in English, in fact.
Although there are some exceptions to this. For example, what's 1 over 2?
Well, most people would just say 1/2 or a half.
And 1 over 3?
1/3,
What about 2 over 3?
2/3.
Or 2/3 if you are from...
2/3 in Ireland.
we should explain that a turd is... Should we explain that?
Well, let's just... You know that strange emoticon you have, which looks like something which comes out of the human body?
From
and
the
it's
behind,
smiling.
yeah, and it's brown and smelly.
Smelly. We call that smiley turd.
Yeah, that's a turd. So that's why we're playing on words here when we use the Irish pronunciation of third. 2/3. 2/3 is the way I pronounce it. How would you say 1 over 4, Reza?
Well, because I'm British/Irish, but not American, I'm going to say 1/4.
And in American pronunciation that you always do much better than I do?
Well, not only pronunciation, different word. They say 1/4 very often. Some Americans say 1/4. Some say 1/4. Have you noticed?
Yep.
You get a mixture.
Yep.
I don't know if it depends on West Coast, East Coast, North, South, but some Americans say 1/4 and one say 1/4.
Or 1/4.
Curious.
1/4. 3/4.
Or 3/4. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's a rule, a geographical rule, which decides who says what in America.
If you live in America and you know the answer to that, please tell us. Send us an email or voice message. We'd like to know if this changes over different states in America.
Or what about as a challenge for Nicholas, he's really interested in accents? Why don't you try and find out, Nicholas, which Americans say 1/4 and which say 1/4? Mm-hmm. If you find out how it works, let us know, please.
Let's move on finally to percentages, which isn't too complicated when you know the word percent, because 34% is 34%, which is very similar to the way you would say it in Spanish. So you say the number and then the word percent.
The only difference is you cannot say a or the plus a percent in English. Typical Spanish mistake. You say el 20%. You say the 20%.
The article. Yes, the article.
You can't do that in English.
No.
You cannot say a or the plus percent. So el 20% is 20%, or un 20%, 20%. No a, no the. Never.
For example, only 20% of listeners to this podcast listen on iOS. Not a 20%, but only 20%. Do you like numbers, Reza? Do numbers come easily to you?
They don't, no.
Me neither.
I'm not good at maths.
Or in America, as they would say, math with no S. So math or maths in British English.
In American English, do they say the full version mathematics or mathematic? Do they put an S on?
I would say they put the S on, but you don't often hear the longer word mathematics.
Mathematics.
They very, very often say math. They say do the math, which we might use a phrasal verb for that expression. Work it out. Work it out means calculate. Imagine you're in a restaurant and there are 6 people who are sharing the bill. You'd say, work out the bill and tell me how much I need to pay. Where an American person might say, do the math, which means calculate it.
Do you have a lucky number, Craig, or a favorite number?
Not really. I like the number 3 quite a lot. And the number 12 I like. I like the number 12, but lucky number, not really. What about you?
I've always liked the number 7. I don't know why, but I like 7.
A prime number.
Yeah. Oh, what's that now?
A prime number is a number that's not divisible by another number. Because 9, you can divide 9 by 3. 3 threes are 9. But 7, you can't really divide 7 by any other numbers. Whole numbers, complete numbers.
3 as well is a prime number then.
That's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, now it's your turn to practice your English. We'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for all the feedback that you've been sending us in these last few weeks. If you want to get in touch and contact us, send us a voice message. You can do that on SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. How can they reach us by email, Reza?
You could contact me, that's belfastreza@gmail.com.
Or me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com. And don't forget to visit our online store if you're interested in buying a course. And you can find that at store.mansioningles.net.
As ever, thanks to all our wonderful patrons. Those are the people who are supporting the podcast on the Patreon website. You can find the names of all the people in our show notes. But a special thank you, as ever, to Bruno, who's our gold sponsor. And Bruno offers walking tours of Copenhagen in English or in Spanish. If you're interested, have a look at his website, copenhagenwalkingtour.com. Or you could try Brazil, because he also does walking tours in Rio de Janeiro. And they're led by local guides, so it's safe. They know where they're going. And the money there helps the community to improve their daily needs. To find out about that one, have a look at favelawalkingtour.com.br.
And if you would like to join our awesome supporters on Patreon for as little as $1 per month, you get instant access to recent transcriptions of the podcast that have been lovingly transcribed by Angelica. To join our wonderful producers, go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And I'm happy to say, since our last podcast, 12 new patrons have joined us. Who are they, Reza?
Our new sponsors are Fernando Antonio de Paula Andrade, Santiago Díaz de Rivera, Alberto B.O., Alejandra Coni, Víctor Vaquero, Luis Sanz Ruiz, Ronald Jesus Espinoza Mora, Andrés Herrera, Alirio Antonio Moreno Medina, Eduardo Hilario, José Aristizábal, and Armando. Thank you. Armando. Short but sweet.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you who have recently joined Patreon. On next week's episode, we're going to be speaking about forensic science, and that is in response to Anya's suggestion. Anya from Mexico, who is studying forensic science at the moment in London. So we're looking forward to speaking about that next week. Until then, thank you very much for listening. It's goodbye from me.
And bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.